I've only been diagnosed with migraine in the last few years, and there's probably a mix of people with episodic and chronic, and I know what it's like from both perspectives. And I think by the time I was in my late 20s, I did have quite chronic migraine. I was working an incredibly busy, stressful job, a lot of travel, and yoga became something that I was learning to do, that it was something I could do in a hotel room. I could do a little bit of relaxation and breath work sitting on a flight. And that's really where my interest came into it. And then I went on to study it a little bit more. And you know, Deirdre and I were just talking about how, you know, sometimes people think yoga is about standing on your head and making these really complicated shapes, when in fact there's so much more to it than that. And a lot of the practices are quite simple and very effective for people living with chronic pain. And I also was diagnosed in my 20s with endometriosis. So I've been finding yoga incredibly helpful for both managing migraine and the endometriosis. So there's a kind of a nice crossover there. And look, what we're going to do this evening is I'm going to go through some slides, and we'll start with a little relaxation, a little bit of breath work. I'm just going to give you some tips and advice on things that I have found helpful over the years. And there will be time at the end for Q&A. So if you have questions, pop them in the chat, and we'll have time to come to those later on. And, you know, I really want you to be comfortable for this. Part of it will be listening. As Deirdre says, turn off the screen if you're, you know, having a day with symptoms where the light on the screen is affecting you. And I'll try my best to make sure that you can follow everything by just listening and not needing to see the slides. We'll do a little bit of practice, but you won't need to see me. I'll do my best, as I say, to just guide you through a very, very gentle, safe practice. So even if you're having a day with bad symptoms today, it might be something that might help you. So we might even just start by getting comfortable, and maybe just making sure you have some water, you know, if you want to have a blanket beside you. And all the things we're going to do, you could actually do sitting in a chair, so you don't, you know, or if you might be lying in bed. I know I've attended some of these talks where I've been in bed with the migraine. So whatever's comfortable, just allow yourself to either lie down or sit down. And we'll just take a moment. I know people are still joining us, and I know some people may have just finished work. So we'll just take a moment to sit and just let our breath be our anchor to just let us settle into the moment. And I can see there's still a few people joining. So let's just sit comfortably. So if you're sitting in a chair, maybe just feeling supported, have your feet flat on the floor underneath you. If you're lying down, you could have the knees bent, or you could have the legs straight out, whatever is comfortable for you. Okay. And if you need to change your position as we're going through this, that's absolutely fine too. So whatever position you're in, just feeling the ground underneath you or the chair underneath you, whatever parts of your body are making contact with the ground underneath, just being aware of that. And you might even just bring your chin in slightly towards your chest, lengthening through the back of the neck. Just a gentle little stretch there. And you could take a nice gentle inhale through the nose, and then just exhale out through the mouth, just letting go, maybe even just letting the breath go with a little sigh, just releasing and taking another breath in. And again, exhaling gently through the mouth, just seeing if you could maybe release a little tension from the shoulders. And it's always good to, with any of these practices, to just take a moment to check in and see how you're feeling this evening. So if you want to close the eyes, go ahead and close them. You don't have to. If you're more comfortable keeping them open, that's okay. Maybe just try and keep your gaze nice and soft. And if you just want to take a moment to just check in and notice how you're physically feeling this evening, taking a moment to notice if there's any little tension or there could be some pain there, and just try as much as possible to just notice what's there without naming it, without judging it, just allowing it to be there. And sometimes there can be tension in places that we're not aware of until we stop and take a moment. So maybe you're noticing a little niggle somewhere, a little bit of discomfort that you weren't aware of. So just notice it's there and then just move on. And you could also take a moment to check in and see how your energy levels are feeling this evening. You may have had a busy day, be feeling a little bit depleted, or your energy might be quite high. You could be a little maybe even a little agitated. So just noticing again what's there with no judgment. Maybe noticing even how you're feeling emotionally, what your mood is like. And then just doing a little check-in with the mind and noticing if you've just joined us and maybe just finished work, your mind might be quite busy. You may have had to look after some family members before joining this call. So just allowing yourself to arrive and to settle. And then just noticing the breath. So wherever you feel the breath, just let your awareness rest there. So that could be, you might just feel a little cool air around the nostrils as you breathe in. You might feel the air moving through the throat. Maybe you feel the air, your breath moving in the chest area or the belly. Just watching the breath, not changing anything about it, just watching it come and go, just feeling the breath. Soften your jaw, your mouth, your cheeks, across the forehead. And just see now, could you soften your abdomen, just letting the belly be just really soft. And if you wanted to even take a hand and place it there, and just see as you breathe in, could you direct the breath right down into the abdomen? So as you're breathing in, you feel how the abdomen fills and expands, just pressing gently into your hand. And as you breathe out, you might just notice how your hand moves back in slightly as the belly moves back in. So just this gentle abdominal breath, just allowing the belly to expand as you breathe in, and just feeling how the belly moves back in on your exhale. And just continuing for a couple more breaths. And what we're doing with this abdominal breathing is, as you let the belly expand with your inhale, you're actually making some space for your diaphragm to move down. And when it moves down, there's a little bit more space for the lungs to expand and fill. So you'll notice as you practice this, your breath will just very naturally and very gradually just begin to slow down. And you may begin to notice already even that as the breath slows down, maybe the mind is becoming a little quieter. You may find yourself becoming a little more grounded, feeling a little bit more relaxed. And we're gonna move on, and I'm going to continue just talking a little bit. So if you're very comfortable and you want to continue doing this, by all means, just continue just at your own pace and rhythm. Or you could just return back to your own everyday natural breath. That's fine too. And I'm just going to start by just talking just a little bit about why yoga might be helpful for somebody with migraine. And I've put a few points here. So one is kind of a more obvious one, I suppose, the physical parts of yoga. It can be very good for helping to improve your posture and your body awareness. So as I said, sometimes we have tension in places we don't even realize are there. And for those of us with migraine, we can get a lot of stiffness in our neck and our shoulders. And I know when I was younger, I thought if I could just do something about the stiffness in my neck, maybe I wouldn't get so many headaches. And that was what kind of prompted me to start doing more yoga. And I now understand that actually the tension in my neck comes from the migraine. It's not the cause of the migraine. It's part of one of the symptoms. But I do notice it is one of my first early signs of migraine is about to come. So by being more aware of that tension, sometimes I can address it a little bit earlier. And improving your posture. If you're sitting at a desk all day and your shoulders are a bit hunched and your head is forward, you might find that that's aggravating. It's not causing your migraine necessarily, but it might be aggravating things a little bit. And the other big thing with yoga is we think of it, of course, as being very helpful for stress. And I'll talk a bit more about stress in a moment. But we do know from all the work the Migraine Association has done and a lot of other international studies, stress and anxiety are always listed as some of the top triggers for people with migraine. So I think that's a really key thing of why yoga can help. And the science behind it, what they're realizing now is that actually a lot of the yoga practices we do are very helpful in increasing vagal tone. And what vagal tone is, if you have a good vagal tone, it's your ability to switch from the fight and flight mode into your what we call the rest and digest mode. So when the phone rings or the phone beeps, something happens and you go into this like high alert state, your ability then to go and calm down, everything's okay, back to normal, let everything settle down. If you've a good high vagal tone, that's really helpful. Of course, we've all been living the last almost 2 years in a state of anxiety. So I think for all of us, anything we can be doing to help with this vagal tone is incredibly helpful, not just those of us with migraine, but it's a good practice to do. And it's kind of really helpful for those of us in yoga. We've been for years going, we know it works, but we didn't really understand why. And now the science is showing us, well, this looks like why. And a big part of yoga is the breath work. We call it pranayama. And it can be really helpful in relaxation, like we just did a very short little practice there. It can be very helpful for pain management, for nausea. I'm going to show you just very briefly a few little practices, and I'm going to have links as well. That I know Deirdre has a copy of this presentation and she'll share it with anyone who wants it. So you don't need to worry about writing anything down or remembering the links that I'm mentioning. It'll all be in the presentation for you. So you can just relax and enjoy this. Another thing in yoga that I think is actually really relevant for people with migraine is a thing called jalaneti. And it's a sinus rinse you do with saline water. Of course, these days you can go buy it in the chemist. They call it the Neilmed sinus rinse. And I find it really helpful in the springtime when the pollen is quite high and I start getting a little bit of little reaction to the pollen, which can aggravate my sinus related migraines. So that's that actually comes from yoga. So that's a very practical one. And I've put in here on the slide that yoga can build resilience. And this is, again, something that's coming out in some of the neuroscience studies and, people talking about neuroplasticity and what's going on in the brain. And I do think people with migraine are incredibly resilient. If you think about everything we managed to do in our lives, how we managed to continue on despite living with migraine. But the yoga is showing practices like yoga and Tai Chi, some of these very kind of mindful movement practices are showing some really interesting results in the brain, and they're linking it to building resilience. And one really helpful thing to know, which I took out of some of the research, is that there seems to be more impact of having a more frequent practice rather than the duration. So rather than thinking, oh, well, I need to be doing an hour of yoga a couple of times a week, you actually don't. You could be doing 5 minutes every day or 15 minutes every 3 days. But just building up and doing it more frequently actually has a really, really helpful impact. So I think that's really helpful for us to know, particularly when we're going through a bad chronic phase where we really don't feel that we can do a huge amount. So just to talk a little bit about stress, I think it's always really important to remember there's good stress as well as bad. I know for me, one of my big migraine triggers is actually excitement, and that's good stress in the body. I can feel it building, so I would have spent, when I was younger and friends getting married, I would have always gotten a migraine at friends' weddings, and it was out of pure excitement, My mother always tells a story of going on holidays as a child. We'd be heading down to Rosslare to get the ferry, and I would have to get out of the car to throw up at the sides of the road by the time we got to Wicklow. And we, I know now as an adult, we know that car sickness in children is often an indicator of migraine later in life. And that's what it was with me, but it was the pure excitement of going on holidays. So we do have to remember, it's not that we want to have no good or bad stress in our lives. Stress can be, it's important. We need a little bit of stress to get us up in the morning and get things done. But as I said, it's that thing of being able to switch from your sympathetic nervous system where the hormones are running, your adrenaline's high, that fight or flight mode, being able to switch back into the parasympathetic nervous system where you're calming everything down. And I like this image of the idea of a dimmer switch. You're just turning down the volume of that activity in your nervous system. And there is some good stuff showing that actually, pain can drive your sympathetic nervous system into kind of overdrive, and that kind of overactivity can increase their perception of pain. So anything you can do to turn that dimmer switch down and dial it down can really help with the pain management. And how we do that in yoga is, obviously, a lot of people talk about meditation. I do think meditation can be, it's not that easy to do if you're living with a lot of pain. And the relaxation techniques we do in yoga are really helpful for that as well. There's a thing called yoga nidra. It's like a relaxation. They call it yogic sleep. You go into a very deep state of relaxation but you stay alert and aware during it. And that can be incredibly helpful if you're going through stressful periods in life. And the breath work that I mentioned, really, really helpful too. So I'm just going to show, for those of you who are looking at the slide, this is just an image of the parasympathetic system. So this is when you're switching from your fight or flight into your rest and digest, letting everything calm down. You can see there's a nerve coming out here. They have a nerve X, and they've put a little label on it, vagus. I hope you can see that. And you can see this vagus nerve in your body. It's about the size of your little finger. It's quite big. And it's running down through your neck, across your chest, and it's linking in with loads of organs in your body. And to me, when I read about this and heard about it, it made such sense to me as somebody who lives with migraine, because we know when we get migraine, it's not just in our heads. We feel it throughout the body. A lot of us, our digestive system starts to act up, play up when an attack is starting. So I think for us, it's very easy to understand that link between the brain and the rest of the body. And it's a bi-directional kind of highway, if you like. So you hear a little bit about the gut-brain axis, and it all travels through that vagus nerve. About the breath work, in yoga we call it pranayama. So prana is the word that translates into life force, your energy, your vitality. And what pranayama is, it's the conscious deliberate regulation of the quality of the breath. And it's the idea of the quality of your breath influences the state of mind and vice versa. So if you can learn, you can do a little bit of control of the breath, it can calm down the mind and have a very calming effect then on the physical body as well. And an overactive nervous system is actually associated with breath holding. If you think about it, when you have a migraine attack, I know when I'm in the depths of a really severe attack, my breath becomes very shallow. And I find it very difficult to do that abdominal breathing like we did at the start. I find all my breath is up in my chest. But if I can gradually begin to deepen it and let it move down into the abdomen, I do find it very helpful in calming everything down. So I do think if you're feeling, even if in between migraine, even if you're having days where you're maybe feeling a little anxious, maybe something even is going on at home or at work, whatever, doing that abdominal breath has a very, very calming effect. So I have a link here that will actually bring you to a video where somebody leads you through it. If you Google it, you'll find loads of them as well. Another suggested pranayama practice is alternate nostril breathing, also known as Nadi Shodhana. And this is a very balancing breath that is very popular in yoga. And you simply breathe in through your left nostril, breathe out through the right nostril, in through the right and out through the left. And that's one round. And you just close off your nostril with your thumb and your ring finger, and you alternate between the two. And again, it's not difficult, but it can be helpful when you're learning it to follow a video or even listen to somebody guiding you through it. So I have a link here for one if you'd like to try that. That's one I would suggest maybe trying to do it every day, even just for a minute. It doesn't have to be long. I would do it in the mornings, sometimes before I even get out of bed. It's a nice one to do. The next one I've included here is called Shitali, and it's known as the cooling breath. This is the one that I have found over the years really helpful for nausea. So when an attack has taken hold, I've maybe taken my medication, I'm waiting for it to work, but I'm feeling quite nauseous, I'll do this Shitali breath. And you're basically taking a bit of cooling air in through the mouth and then breathing out through the nose. If there's time at the end, I might demonstrate it, but otherwise I have a link to a video. And I think this one could be quite helpful for anyone who experiences menstrual migraine. If you find your body's a little bit overheated, or menopause, you're finding, there is that heat building, this is a really useful breath for that as well. And the last one I've included here is called the humming bee breath, or Bhramari. And this is a really helpful one for pain. This is one actually they do teach in antenatal classes. So some people may know it already. And it's simply, you take a nice smooth breath in and then you breathe out humming. And I have taught this to people with migraine in some workshops, and they did say they did find it very helpful. It's very calming, very soothing. And you will see, if you look it up on the links you'll find, you'll actually see some of the yoga practitioners will actually close their eyes, cover their eyes, their nostrils, their mouth, and their their ears with their fingers and thumbs to just close off all the senses. Now, I know when I'm in an attack, I probably wouldn't like to do that, but in between, as a regular practice, I would sometimes do this on a daily basis, just maybe 3 rounds of it, and I would just close off all those senses to just try and bring the awareness more kind of inside, and it feels very calming and very nice. So again, don't worry about writing these down because Georgia will have the presentation with the links. And just to mention, sometimes I get asked, what type of yoga do you do, or what type of yoga do you recommend for somebody with migraine? And just to know, there's, we think of yoga as the physical aspect, and that's what we call asana. We've talked about the breath. There's 8 limbs to yoga. So no matter what type of yoga you do, they'll all include these 8 elements. I'm not going to go through them all there now, but just to be aware that they'll all have similar things. What my suggestion would be, if you are new to yoga and it's something you want to try, I would look for classes that say they are hatha or vini yoga, yin yoga, somatic yoga, any of those words. They're kind of what I would be looking for, or maybe asking a teacher, what can I expect in your class? What's your background? What's your training? The ones to be a little bit more careful about are the faster, more dynamic ones. So if you see Ashtanga, Vinyasa, Hot yoga, which is sometimes also called Bikram yoga, they're the ones that, I'm not saying don't do them. You might be fine. It just depends on where you are. If you're quite physically active, you might enjoy those quite dynamic ones. But I would start slow with some of the other ones. And, over time you might find, like, my practice now has changed. It used to be a lot gentler. Now I find I'm actually able to do a lot more than I could 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I would have done a very gentle practice before. Now I find I can do more. And my migraine symptoms have reduced over time, not just because of yoga. I was Georgia before and saying I actually went back on a preventive medication last year because I just felt with perimenopause my migraines were becoming more frequent again, and I just thought I need to do something else. So I'm not saying yoga is the be all and end all for migraine, but it is very nice as to support you in whatever else you're doing to manage your migraine. I would just say a little, I think, work out what works for you with migraine or with yoga, and what type of practice you'd like and what fits into your life. I would just say a little caution around something like hot yoga. The people who do it and like it absolutely love it. On a personal level, it wasn't for me. I found dehydration is a migraine trigger for me. So I found I was drinking so much water during the day in preparation for the class that that was making me anxious about going to the class. It just wasn't worth it. So just be a little bit mindful of some of those practices. Might just, you need to just think about how else it fits into your migraine management. I think just some general tips as well on doing yoga. I think just be a little bit careful about your neck. If feeling dizzy, a little bit of vertigo, if you've got some vestibular migraine symptoms, just don't feel that you always have to take your head up or turn your head a certain way. Just do what feels right for you and your neck. Those of you who do yoga will know triangle pose, and typically people will turn their gaze to look up towards their fingertips. As soon as I do that, I get really dizzy. So I always look forward. So adapt it and talk to a teacher in a class. If something you feel just doesn't really work for you, ask them for a bit of advice. And maybe just be a little bit careful around doing forward bends or back bends. You might find you get a little bit dizzy with those again. So just a little bit of caution with moving the head. And again, it's not that you don't do them, you just build up slowly and see what works for you. And if you find you're maybe doing a class and you're getting a headache or your migraine symptoms flare up a little bit afterwards, have a chat with the teacher. There's always alternatives to things, and you might just need to slow it down or take something a step back, try something a little bit different. A lot of classes will do what they call sun salutations. It's a sequence of poses and you flow from one to the other, and it can be quite slow or it can be quite fast paced. And I know when I started, I really struggled with this because of dizziness and my migraine. I would come to stand up quite quickly, get dizzy, my head might begin to hurt. So I would say if you're in a class where they're doing that, just slow it down. Don't worry about what anyone else is doing. No one else is looking at you and thinking about what you're doing. So do what you need to do, take a little break, pause down. I'm usually a few seconds behind everybody else when I'm doing them, because like that, I just need to give my head a couple of seconds more to adapt. I've put in a little caution here around some stronger breath work. You probably won't come across this in a standard kind of class, but there are some pranayama practices, like one called Kapalabhati. They generate quite a lot of heat and can be quite energizing and can activate your nervous system, and that might not be the most helpful thing for you to do with migraine. So just I think start with the pranayama practices I talked about earlier. They're the more gentler ones. And then when you've established those and you feel very comfortable doing those, then you could maybe go on to do some of the other ones, but just be a little bit careful about those. And if you're going to a class in a studio or in your local community center or something, I know sometimes the environment might not be that conducive and helpful to people with migraine. So do talk to the teacher. I know I've gone to classes where I go early to make sure I get the spot where I'm not lying directly under a particular fluorescent light or something. Sometimes teachers will light incense or candles that can really aggravate those of us with migraine. So, you could just politely chat to them and say, look, I'm really loving the class, really enjoying it, but I find this is really not helpful for me by the end of the class. I don't feel well because of the scented candle that's lit. And, teachers want you to be comfortable and enjoy the class. So they will be very happy to accommodate you if you just let them know. And if dizziness is a bit of a thing, I know in the beginning, I found it quite difficult lying flat on the floor. And even though lying flat on the floor is really good for helping you establish good posture, you get great feedback from the floor of lying where your head and your neck are in relation to the rest of your spine. So if you feel a little bit dizzy in the beginning when you're lying down, just put something under your head. I would keep it very thin, not like a big thick block, but maybe just a little hand towel folded in half, just to lift yourself up maybe just a couple of centimeters, and just see if that helps. And even just bringing the chin closer to the chest, lengthening the back of the neck, that can help. And a little advice over hydration and blood sugar. I talked about the hydration, but sometimes, if you look at the advice about my yoga, people will say, oh, practice in the morning and you shouldn't eat for 2 hours beforehand and all this kind of thing. Look, when you live with migraine, your blood sugar levels are so important. So do what you need to do. If you need to have a snack before you go to class, then absolutely do that, so that you keep yourself healthy and well. And I think it's a really good idea to maybe develop your own practice, lovely and all as it is to go to classes and have a teacher. If you can begin to develop your own little practice at home that you could do a couple of times a week, maybe even 5-10 minutes a day, I think that's really, really valuable. And it's really a case of there's no kind of one size fits all. So you've got to kind of work out what works for you. And if you think about not so much what you should be doing, but maybe thinking, starting off by thinking, well, how do I feel today? So doing that little check-in like we did earlier on, what are my energy levels like? How am I physically feeling? How do I feel that I want to move my body today? And some days you'll want to do very little movement, and other days you'll want to do a bit more. So just really pay attention to that. If you're coming, you feel you're coming into a prodrome phase of migraine, it's going to be a very different practice to what you might do in the recovery phase of a migraine, or what you might do in between attacks. So don't feel that it has to be, the same all the time. Adapt it and do what's right for you on any given day. And always stop before you get tired. So I know there was a great migraine associated with Whelan who talked about pacing, and I think that's just so helpful to remember. Just always stop before you get tired. So they're just some general tips and advices, and I'm going to talk a little bit about just a few poses. And if you want to do these with, we can do a few. These ones in particular we could do as we're sitting, if you're sitting in your chair or you're sitting on the floor. Really helpful for anyone with migraine to do neck and shoulder stretches. So you could, even if you're sitting in your chair right now, even if you just wanted to bring your chin towards your chest, stretching out the back of the neck, just releasing, letting go, just noticing what tension is there. And as you inhale, just bring the head back up. And if you can, I know you can't see me, but if you can just imagine now just interlinking your hands, and then just turning your palms away from you and extending your arms out in front of you. So as if you're pushing something away from you. And as you take a breath in, if you want to raise the arms up, so you're aiming to bring them up beside the ears. They may not get there, that's fine. And then just take the backs of the hands back down to rest on the crown of the head. So you have your elbows out to the sides, and you just have the backs of the hands resting on the top of the head. So you can probably already feel you're getting a little bit of a stretch in the front of the chest. You might feel a little bit of sensation around the shoulder blades. And as you breathe in, just gently press the crown of the head up into the hands. So you'll feel your spine beginning to lengthen and extend a little bit here. And then if you want to release the hands and just take them behind your head, and you could just cup the hands again and just let the base of the skull now sit into the hands. So the elbows are still out to the side, your chest is lifted, and you're just letting the head be heavy, just letting the base of the skull just sink down gently into the hands. Your hands are just totally supporting the weight of the head. And you just give yourself a little bit of traction here. You could just gently with the hands, just give a little gentle pressure to the base of the skull. You'll feel the back of the neck lengthening up a little bit. You might even feel a bit of sensation running down between the shoulder blades. And next time you breathe out, you could bring the chin towards the chest. Let the hands just guide the head. The elbows can move down now towards each other, so moving towards the midline of the body. So you're getting a nice little stretch in the back of the shoulders. And as you breathe in, just gently begin to lift through the chest. The arms will begin to come up and out to the sides. Your head will gently come up. You're lifting the chest. You can feel the shoulder blades squeezing together. And then as you exhale again, you could release down. So as the chin begins to move towards the chest, the elbows move in towards each other. You feel the shoulder blades moving away from each other. And then inhaling, beginning to lift through the chest. Let the head come slowly back up. The elbows will come back out to the sides. If you want to do a little bit stronger work for the shoulders, on the slides here, you'll see there's one here where we cross the arms. It's called eagle pose. So you would start by taking the arms out to the sides, and then you will cross one arm on top of the other, stack the elbows on top of each other. I'm going to turn to the side so it's a bit easier to see. And then the backs of the hands come up together. Some people may have the flexibility that they can take the palms of the hands together, or you might even just interlink the little finger and the thumb. And you'll feel the shoulder blades moving away from each other. So it's a nice little stretch. And if you bring the elbows up a little higher, you'll get a little bit more intensity. So that could be quite a nice little one to relieve a bit of tension. And to come out of it, you bring the elbows back down and unwrap the arms and release everything. And the other one, that's a great one to do, is one where you, and I will just turn so you can see, you take one arm up and drop the hand down to maybe just hold the top of your jumper. Your other hand comes around and you take it up behind. So the hands may meet, you may be able to interlink the fingers, or you may just be grabbing hold of your top, and you're just encouraging a bit of openness. I know when I get migraine, if I've spent a bit of time curled up in bed, I'm rounded and sore, I really need to open up this area across the chest. So that's a really good one to do. And just watch that you keep the head in the center, that you're not tilting it and letting it drop to the side. So that's a good one to do. And if the hands don't meet comfortably, you could use, you can see in the picture there, the lady is using a belt. You could use your dressing gown belt or anything at all to just hold between the hands. That's a really nice one to do for the shoulders. And if you Google, neck and shoulder stretches, there's just so many things on YouTube that can be helpful, that'll guide you through it. I'm not going to demonstrate this. I'm just going to show you photos of this. It's a bit too hard to do it online, but just to show you, these are all photographs of variations of forward bends, and forward bends in yoga are very calming and soothing. So there's a few different types here. So you'll see the top one on the right, the girl has her head resting on a block, and she's sitting down in what we call child's pose. So that can be quite a nice one to do, but it could be tough on the ankles and the knees and the hips. So, for some people that might not be that comfortable. So over here, you'll see there's a lady doing a nice variation with a chair. So she's just sitting comfortably and she's leaning forward, and she has a blanket on the chair. So there's a bit of padding, and she has her arms there. And if you come into this pose, you might like to try this even when you have a migraine and see if it's calming and soothing. You could get into this and do some of the breath work. That big breath would be a nice one to do here. What you're doing is you're just calming down the nervous system. And the other version here, this lady sitting on the, I don't know whether she's on the floor or on a bed, but you can see she's got lots of pillows, giving herself a little bit of support so she can just release down completely into it. And you can just stay in this. It's very soothing and calming. Could be nice to do before you go to bed. Could be nice to do maybe if you can feel a migraine coming on. Again, you're just giving the signal to your nervous system to just settle and calm down. Now, I'm fully aware that sometimes when we have a migraine, going forward and taking our head forward is the last thing we want to do. It can make the pain worse. If you're someone like that, you might like to try a back bend. Now, personally, I don't particularly like to do these when I have a migraine, but I love them when I'm in the recovery phase of a migraine. So there's a few different versions here. You can see both ladies in this case, they have an eye pillow over their eyes, which is lovely as well, blocking out all the light. The lady on the left here has her knees bent. So if you've got any tension in your lower back, we're just doing it with the knees bent rather than the legs out straight along the floor. And you can see both of them, they've got a little lift in the chest, so a little slight back bend. This lady is using some blocks. This lady is using a blanket. I would start with a blanket and just keep it quite low and quite gentle. The arms can go wherever you want. She's got this lovely stretch now with the arms out beyond her head. So she's got a lovely bit of openness and stretching through the front of the body. So as I say, I find this really nice after an attack where I've been curled up in a ball. I just want to open out and stretch everything out. So they can be really nice to do. This is possibly my favorite pose and I think really helpful for everybody. It's Viparita Karani is the name. They call it the Great Reviver, but legs up the wall is what people usually remember it as. So the lady on the left is doing the kind of classic version of the legs straight up the wall. If you've got any lower back problems, that might not be that comfortable. So I've put in another picture of somebody doing it with the legs bent and on a chair. So you could even do it with the legs maybe resting on a bed if your bed's not too high. So it's worth playing around and seeing what you have at home. In this, you want to feel completely supported and held. So what this is really good for actually, as well as if you've been walking for hours, it can be great for the old legs. I find this very good for settling the nervous system. We talked earlier about triggers and anxiety and upset and excitement being a migraine trigger. This one really settles and calms things down. So if I find I've had an upsetting day, somebody's upset me, there's been a bit of a row or something going on, I find getting into this, my emotions just settle. I become a lot calmer. It's a great one to do before bed. So if you were to do no other pose, you were only going to try one, this would be the one I would say try and do. Now, it's probably not one you want to do during a migraine, but it's a great one to do in between attacks, or try it maybe in the prodrome. You might just find in the prodrome, you might just actually be able to stave off an attack. So one that's really worth practicing and learning. And I've put this one in as well. This is the lying down supported cobbler pose. You can see their knees are just out to the side, the soles of the feet are together. And this is a great one for women. So if you get a lot of menstrual migraine, hormonally related migraine, this is a great one. What you're doing is creating a lot of space in the pelvis. So it can be very good if you've got any kind of period pain, that kind of heavy kind of feeling. And again, you can see the lady on the right has a lot of blocks and blankets. She's got everything going on there to give herself lots of support. And again, you just want to feel held and secure in that. So the names are all in these slides, which Georgia can share with you. So you'll find more online, more examples and help. So I have a whole list of helpful resources here. So these can all be shared, just various relaxations and meditations and videos I've found over the years that I thought helped. Because I know originally when I was looking for things online for yoga and migraine, I found very little and I was at a bit of a loss. So I kind of built these up over time of things I thought helpful. Yoga with Adrienne, lots of people know her. She does have a specific video on her channel for migraine, and it's actually pretty nice. Sometimes I find there's people, you'll find their stuff and you think, gosh, they've no idea what it's like to have a migraine. But with Adrienne, when she does this, I thought she knows what it's like to have a migraine. She gets it. And there's another lady I'd like to just mention called Vidyamala Birch. And she's a woman who lives with a lot of chronic pain. And she's a great website called Breathworks. you do have to subscribe to some of the things, but she has a YouTube channel where she shares stuff every week. So she's great on all the breath work. So if you are living with a lot of chronic pain, I'd suggest looking her up. She has some really short videos and some longer ones. She's a great resource. And then, of course, there's loads of apps. A lot of people know Headspace. Insight Timer is one that I have used for a long time, find it great. And another one called mindfulness.com has, they actually have some really good courses, including one actually by Vidyamala Birch. And I think what's really interesting about all the mindfulness and meditation stuff, Deirdre mentioned I still volunteer and do some stuff. And the last couple of years I volunteered with the Migraine World Summit, which is an online conference for people living with migraine. And it's really interesting. Over the years, I've noticed all the doctors, all the experts talk now about the importance of relaxation and finding things like mindfulness or yoga. They're mentioning it more and more. So they really understand, yes, you need your drug therapy, you need your neuromodulation devices, but anything you can do yourself is so important in managing your migraine. So there's some helpful resources. Yoga Therapy Ireland is where I did my training. If you go to their website, if you're looking for a teacher, they have a directory there where you'll find phone numbers. So you could, find somebody in your area, have a chat with them, explain that you live with migraine and that you have a few questions before you try a class. And all teachers will be happy for you to come out and try a class rather than commit to a whole course when you're not really sure. So, do ask. And then that's it. And look, my details are here. Very happy for Deirdre to share them with anyone. If you have a question at any time, you can always get in touch with me. I'm always happy to help people living with migraine, any little tips or advice. So do please feel free to get in touch.